South Korea, famous for its technology and pop culture, has a dark secret. It's called Brothers' Home. From 1975 to 1987, it pretended to be a place to help people in Busan. But it was a nightmare. Imagine being taken off the street just because someone said you were a vagrant. Maybe you were homeless. Maybe you were an orphan. Maybe you were just in the wrong place. This happened to thousands at Brothers' Home. Men, women, and even kids were locked up. They were forced to work like slaves. They were tortured. Beatings happened every day. Sexual assault was common. It even had its own jail. It's scary to think about, right? That in a modern country such bad things could happen. But it gets worse. People disappeared. Some say they were killed. These weren't criminals. They weren't hurting anyone. They were just people who needed help. People who were forgotten. Now their stories are finally being told. They tell us about a place where people were treated terribly. Imagine living in fear, never knowing what would happen next. The trauma these people suffered is hard to imagine. Their stories remind us that human rights are important and that bad things can happen anywhere. Brothers' Home is a terrible part of South Korea's history. It shows us what can happen when people in power do bad things. How could this place exist for over 10 years? The answer is simple and disturbing. The government knew. In the 1970s and 80s, South Korea wanted to look good to the world. The 1986 Asian Games and the 1988 Olympics were coming up, and the government wanted to hide anyone they thought looked bad. They made a rule, Ordinance number 410, which they called Purifying the Streets. This rule let the police take anyone off the streets they didn't like. Homeless people, disabled people, mentally ill people, even street vendors and orphans. These were the people South Korea didn't want the world to see. Brothers' Home became a place to hide these people. The government ignored the terrible things happening there. They only cared about looking good. This wasn't just ignoring the problem, they helped it happen. The people who were supposed to protect these people hurt them instead. Brothers' Home shows us that bad things often happen in plain sight, with the approval of those in power. It teaches us that progress shouldn't hurt people, and that a good society protects those who need help. Brothers' Home might seem like something from the past, from a faraway place, but the things it shows us are still important today. The Netflix show Squid Game, about inequality and desperation, was popular all over the world. That's because it shows a scary reality that feels too real, similar to Brothers' Home. Both Brothers' Home and Squid Game show the bad side of progress, where being rich and successful is more important than treating people right. In both, we see people forced to hurt each other, treated like objects, and used by a system that's against them. The desperation that led people to Brothers' Home, whether they were forced or had nowhere else to go, is like the desperation that makes people in Squid Game play deadly games. The powerful people, the way people are treated like objects, the terrible violence. These aren't just made up, they reflect real problems in our world. The popularity of Squid Game shows that these problems are everywhere. It reminds us that Brothers' Home isn't just one bad event, but part of a bigger problem. A problem where being unequal is okay, people are used, and suffering is ignored so others can succeed. Getting justice for the victims of Brothers' Home has taken a long time. For many years, no one talked about what happened. But the truth always comes out. Survivors, still hurt by their past, have bravely spoken up. They want someone to take responsibility. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission is investigating Brothers' Home, and there is hope for justice. But healing takes time. Many of the people who did these bad things haven't been punished. They hide behind the law or say they didn't do anything. The fight for justice isn't over. Survivors are still dealing with the trauma. Many have PTSD, with bad dreams and flashbacks. Even after everything they went through, many survivors find comfort in telling their stories, in breaking the silence about Brothers' Home. Their bravery is amazing. It gives us hope. The story of Brothers' Home isn't just about terrible things, it's a call to do something. It reminds us to be careful, to make sure powerful people do the right thing, and to protect those who need help. It reminds us that progress shouldn't hurt people. and that real justice means not just admitting what happened, but making sure it never happens again.